Imagine walking through a jungle, not knowing if your next step could be your last. Welcome to the terrifying reality of the Vietnam War. Our story unfolds in the midst of the Vietnam War, an era marked by the chilling combination of guile, fear, and survival. This was a war fought not only with bullets and bombs, but with the very landscape itself. The lush, dense jungles of Vietnam were transformed into a deadly maze of hidden dangers, where the line between life and death was as thin as a tripwire. Let's take a look at the deadliest booby traps used in the Vietnam War. The traps were as varied as they were deadly. The environment played a crucial role in this deadly game of hide and seek. The dense foliage provided perfect cover for the traps, while the wet, muddy ground made it difficult to spot the signs of tampered terrain. Even the weather was an ally to the trap setters, with heavy rainfalls washing away footprints and other potential giveaways. The fear was palpable. Every step was a calculated risk, every path a potential death trap. The soldiers were not just fighting an enemy, they were fighting the very environment they were in, an environment that had been turned against them in the most terrifying way. As we journey through this narrative, remember to step lightly, for the ground beneath our feet is treacherous. So, brace yourselves as we delve into the deadly world of Vietnam War booby traps. In no particular order, first we have exploding motorbikes. Motorbikes were placed around villages and cities which were expected to be invaded by US soldiers. The bikes were rigged, and once the bike was mounted, the trap would activate. This would cause serious injury and even death. 2, we have rigged trophies. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese noticed that the US soldiers liked to take photos with enemy flags. Communist flags were then rigged to blow when picked up. This quickly moved on to other items that were deemed as valuable to the American soldiers. 3, the rubber band grenade. The rubber band grenade was used by the Viet Cong and NVA due to it being easily made. With the pin removed, the lever pressed, with rubber bands placed on the lever to compress it. These were then left in their huts. US soldiers used to burn the huts down, and while the hut was burning, the rubber band would melt, setting off the grenade, causing injury to any nearby troops. 4, foot traps. Various foot traps were used in the war, mainly used to cause injury, but could potentially turn lethal. These were usually made from nails or stakes, the sharps dipped in poison or excrement. Popular methods of use were digging a large hole with stakes placed in, and the hole covered. When stepped on, the soldier's foot goes into the hole and onto the stakes. Sometimes the spikes were pointing down, so that if a soldier stood on the trap, their foot would become impaled when lifting their limb free. These were then modified further to include grenades. 5, the cartridge trap. This consisted of digging a hole, placing a nail, bamboo, and a .50 caliber cartridge in the hole, then covered with cardboard, nicknamed the toe popper. These traps were placed on footpaths frequented by US troops. When stepped on, the cartridge would press into the nail, causing it to fire. This would cause serious injury to the soldier. These traps also used as warning signs and ambush sites. Before we continue, don't forget to comment your thoughts about the video and hit that like and subscribe button. Next, we have the punji stick traps. Similar to the foot traps mentioned above, these traps were larger and made to impale the whole body of the victim. As well as being used in holes, they were also used in long grass in fields, which could be used as an ambush site. As the first instinct when fired upon is to dive for cover, the soldiers could potentially dive straight onto a punji stick, impaling themselves. 7, snake pits. Like the pits dug for the spikes mentioned in earlier traps, these were filled with snakes. The most commonly used was the yellow-bellied bamboo pit vipers, better known to US troops as the two-stepper, due to the fact that death could be instantaneous within 2 steps. 8, tripwires. One of the most terrifying traps involved tripwires. These include the canned grenades, crossbows covered in excrement, a large swinging ball with spikes called the mace, the bamboo whip, which was a bamboo stick held with tension, which had spikes on it. Another was the raft, which once tripped would drop a wooden raft with spikes onto a soldier's head. 9, landmines. Generally regarded as the most terrifying trap, over a third of Marine deaths were attributed to landmines or explosive traps. The most commonly used mine was the DH-10 directional fragmentation mine. The large mine was over a foot long, weighing over 30 pounds, with a blast radius of up to 200 meters. Lastly, we have rat tunnels. Used by the NVA and VC for a number of purposes, these tunnels were pitch black and were only big enough to fit in one person. While navigating, troops would encounter rats and bats scurrying past them. U.S. soldiers armed with only a sidearm and a flashlight would try and clear out the tunnels, but, if they made a wrong turn, would run into mines, spike traps, and snake traps. Known as the worst job in the war, these tunnels were usually cleared out by soldiers less than 5'5", known as the tunnel rats. Decades have passed since the Vietnam War ended, but the legacy of these deadly traps still lingers. The Vietnam War, like any conflict, left indelible scars on the land and its people, but the persistent danger posed by its booby traps is particularly haunting. In the aftermath of the war, unexploded ordnances littered the landscape, their deadly payloads remaining dormant yet dangerous. These forgotten relics of war have caused countless injuries and fatalities long after the last shots were fired. From farmers tilling their fields to children playing, no one is immune to the danger they pose. Even today, the task of locating and defusing these remnants of war continues, a grim testament to the far-reaching consequences of conflict. Beyond the physical danger, the psychological impact of these booby traps cannot be overstated. They created a climate of fear and suspicion during the war, with every step potentially being one's last. This psychological warfare extended beyond the battlefield, affecting civilians and soldiers alike. The echoes of this fear still reverberate through the generations, a haunting memory of a time when danger lurked behind every corner. In the deadly game of war, the Vietnamese guerrillas turned the landscape itself into a weapon. As we've journeyed through the treacherous jungles of Vietnam, we've uncovered the chilling reality of war's hidden arsenal. Ingenious yet horrific, the booby traps used by the Vietnamese guerrillas were not just weapons. They were psychological tools designed to instill fear and uncertainty in the enemy. From the simple yet lethal punji trap to the more complex and deadly designs, these booby traps played a pivotal role in the Vietnam War. They turned the seemingly innocent landscape into a minefield of hidden dangers, demonstrating that, in war, the environment can be just as deadly as the enemy's guns. These traps have left a lasting legacy, not just in the physical scars they inflicted, but in the psychological impact they had on soldiers. As we leave the treacherous jungles of Vietnam, remember this: war is not just about the weapons we see, but also the hidden dangers that lurk beneath our feet.